My family crashed at my place for a week. Turns out, family time can teach you much more about business than a boardroom. This was a crash course in accepting that sometimes the best business insights can come from people who know nothing about your business. And I know what you're thinking. If your family is in town for a week, if you are spending even a holiday with them, you're already going to pull out your hair. Just the thought of spending extended time with your family can drive a lot of us nuts. We entrepreneurs are different, and I get that. I'm here to acknowledge that with you. I also today am going to challenge you to think about your family and family time differently. My family flew into Phoenix, specifically my mom and dad. So it's me, my mom, my dad, and my son all hanging out. And this week was one of those weeks where I learned a lot. There were some good moments, some great moments, some challenging moments. And in this kind of experience, I tend to zoom out as far as I can. It's just my personality. Maybe it's yours too. Given that entrepreneurship is all about lifestyle, and if you've been listening to this show for a while, you know how much of a hardhead I am for the reason we start business is for lifestyle. Then this week was a great example of what that lifestyle could look like, right? Where you can provide, where you can support, you can nurture memories being created. My parents are older and it's important. I want to have these memories with them, not just with my son, with me too. And at the same time, we all know that family dynamics can be very tricky, especially for a week when they're staying at your place. I learned 3 very important things this week, and each of them came from conflict. Now, there wasn't like conflict in the house. It was just inner conflict that I dealt with. I don't know if you deal with this. It's certainly my story from childhood, but when I get stuck on something, it just like swirls in my head. It goes over and over, and I can't necessarily find my way out of it until it works its way through. Over time, I've gotten better at not letting it last so long. It's still just, it takes time. And, I don't know if you can see the image behind me if you're on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, hi. If you're just listening, you can't see the image. There's this image of an older man and then a younger son. And, there are these really special moments when you hang with family. Sometimes there are really difficult moments. In taking time to reflect, I just dropped my parents off at the airport this morning. There's not a whole lot of time to reflect, but I reflect fast and I'm mindful of how to reflect as I go. So in just my run after I dropped them off, a lot came to mind. And if you are like me, you're probably very different from your family. You're probably very different from where you grew up, right? The people that you grew up with, your high school people. I think I have my high school reunion coming up. And I feel very different from where I grew up, how I grew up. There's also this sometimes guilt of like, I'm not connected. I'm experiencing a very different circumstance than they are. So there's a lot in it, right? There's a lot of components to this. But I'm learning a couple things, and these things might help you if you struggle with your family dynamics. Maybe not even struggle, maybe just want some reassurance that you're not alone. I think this will help you. My first reflection was that it's really important to have a tribe, right? I'm a big masterminder. Like I believe in hanging with entrepreneurs. I believe in hanging with creatives and other like go-getter, ambitious types. I believe in that. And I'm not here to knock that. What I'm learning though is that you also can't get trapped in that echo chamber because that is also a channel, right? Where everything is the same. And yeah, we're all after the same things, but we also forget the same thing. And sometimes that kind of familiarity, if you only hang with entrepreneurs, breeds its own kind of comfort. There's a diversity in hanging with your old ecosystem or your family, where a different perspective comes up. Largely, those conversations or the differences that I experience have to do with money. They have to do with lifestyle. They have to do with health, things that they may not even be aware of yet or care about the way that I do. And there's a gap. And that kind of diversity actually creates a really important reality check for me. It's great to be around entrepreneurs, but it's also important to be around people that do not think like entrepreneurs and can provide an ulterior and very unique perspective if you're only around creatives. echo chambers are bad for business, like hands down, they're bad for business. And if you're going to take on more and you're really trying to create something that is meant for, success and expansion and scale, then you've got to welcome new voices to the table. And I think that family has challenged me in many ways, not always in the most comfortable manner, but it has challenged me to think about innovation and think about opportunity very differently than I might have on my own. I think the idea of embracing the tribe that's like you is good. It's also important to make sure you get other opinions. And sometimes those opinions come from the people that know you really well. Family this week was a reminder that I've got still plenty of room to grow with the way that my perspective can become narrow based on my environment of entrepreneurs. The second thing that I learned is that acceptance is an entrepreneurial superpower. I am reminded of this moment where I'm looking at the shopping list. I asked my parents to grab a couple things while they were out, and the shopping list that they brought back is very different from the shopping list that I would have brought back. Not in a bad way, just in a different way. And immediately, this this emotion started coming up of like, well, why didn't they ask me more questions, or why didn't they, dig in more? I was noticing my own insecurity about it. There is this part of leadership in business, certainly true in this moment with family, where we want someone to be like us. If you're an entrepreneur, you know this feeling. Why aren't you moving fast like me? Why aren't you thinking like me? Why didn't you think of this? And it's become really apparent through the lens of coaching and working with CEOs that we all think this way, right? We're like, well, obviously, why didn't everyone think? Well, if everyone thought this way, everyone would be a CEO. And there's this comedy almost in what we expect someone else to be able to see, vision, an opportunity, a life, a communication pattern, an opportunity to, push and prod and make things happen versus kind of yield. And this same sort of acceptance is present with family, where they don't think like me. And that's okay. I like the way they think. But it's taken me a lot of work to get to a place of loving and accepting my family's quirks, because we have a lot of them. I would love if different things happened with family. And that's not my place. I can't change them. And I've learned that for their faults, their flaws, just like mine, we can collectively be better if we accept how things are. And my job is to accept them at where they are and to meet them where they are, not to change and make them morph to my version of what I would like them to be. And when you can learn to accept your family quirks, you really are training yourself to skill to do the same thing for your team, where you can accept their quirks and become an empathetic leader through the lens of appreciation for who they are, authentically expressed and real. And look, teams are looking for that. It's, I think, easier with teams than it is with family, because there's a professionalism, right? There's a different set of clearer expectations, where families, you got to assert your boundaries and communicate and be a little bit more tactful, because you can get lazy, right? You can get lazy in the permanence of things. But nonetheless, it's an important piece of this like acceptance theme. There's also this piece with my parents where like I'm working hard to not always be right, and trying to see their perspective differently. My life has changed a lot in the last couple of years, and the more that my life changes, the more I notice small things. There was a moment where me and my mom were talking about something that had to do with like $10, right? And she was like, "Well, you could save $10," and my system immediately went into like, "Well, I'm not going to worry about $10 problems. Like, I need to be focused on bigger problems, right?" And there's some truth in that as a CEO, but also I came from $10 problems, and to accept that she could see that and to appreciate that and to not get wrapped up in like, well, I'm better than, or, all these different stories that just go nuts in my head takes a little bit of work. I think that our different viewpoints, our different relationships with money have taught me humility and adaptability. And there was definitely some work this week to navigate, but it also reminds me of how hard they had to work and how much they created for me to be able to become what I've become, and for me to learn new things and create new opportunities and a different relationship with money largely came from seeing their relationship and their teaching. You know, I think the qualities of being able to accept parents translates directly in a team. It is really important, and being the odd duck and being the outsider sometimes in family discussions or trying to lead has actually created this clarity and that vulnerability. And I mean that in a way that isn't like, well, just say something that's unexpected. No, I mean opening up in a way that could create backlash, right? In a vulnerable conversation, what you are doing is you are unveiling your truth and your feelings and what's going on internally just from your perspective. And that can be incredibly scary, but that's what fosters connection. And in family dynamics, at least like mine, where I feel like the outsider all the time, and I feel like, I've grown so much, and I really wish that my parents might adopt the same mentality that I have, has forced me to really look at acceptance and to really work on acknowledging where they are and not trying to change it and just accepting it. The patterns, the habits, the behaviors, the communication, and even awareness to know that they are my folks. I want the best for them. I sometimes can be driven mad by them. I'm sure, like all of us, and also that I accept them for where they are and who they are. It's taken me work, but it has also applied to business. The third thing that comes to mind is that, the only way to really lead effectively is to stay grounded, right? To stay centered. And man, in family, there's like this version of me that I feel that I've outgrown at times. You probably feel this way too, where you're not who you were anymore. The way you think has changed. It's morphed. It's evolved. Like you can't go back. It's like, you crumple up a paper. You can't make it flat again. You can go back to home. You can go back to where you're from. You can go back to your old city. You can go back to your old friends, but it's not the same. And you know that, and I know that. But that doesn't mean that there's not value in those relationships, especially family ones, where those old roots can keep you grounded. I think knowing and staying really close with my parents and sometimes grappling with those differences and gaps is really what keeps me connected to my values, even when I'm, reaching for the stars and trying to expand. And I have all these ideas about like changing the family lineage and all these stories that I'm sure you've heard in your head too, like that you have to do this. But at the end of the day, they also remind me of where I came from. We played a game of Uno. There's a really cool new Uno game called No Mercy. Ruthless game, like an iteration of Uno. They came out with a couple new editions, and we're playing this game, and like that's what I remember from being a kid. And it's easy to get wrapped up in what restaurant do I need to take them to, or how do I impress them, or all these silly stories in my head. These are my parents, and getting back to my values reminds me of where I came from and what really matters. I also think that what they do and what they can do while they're here is they can see things that I've become blind to. They ask some really good questions about, where I want to go as a dad and where I'm taking the business and what life is like out here. It's summer, so it's hot, so we were kind of trapped inside. Felt like quarantine in a way. And those different outlooks had like, as much as they made me uncomfortable because they felt more like statements than suggestions. You probably know what I mean from parents. those things still, they help me refine and rethink my approach. And they remind me that the pursuit of business is really about this tethered tension between reality and vision. Like, am I working towards vision? Yes. Am I in reality? Yes. And there are some realities. My dad, while he was here, was fixing a table and like lost his balance and skinned his knee, and like he was outside, skinned his knee, skinned his forehead, and he was working on the table, and like that's a reality for me that I have to remember. I have to remember that he's getting older, and in my mind, he's my hero, right? He's always got, he's always fixing stuff and doing things, and he's getting older, and that's a reality. Now, I can think that I can just vision my way and build a business to fix that, but I can't fix that. There's no business, there's no money, there's no reality that I can escape from that. There's nothing but delusion to think that I can outpace that. He's getting older and I need to be mindful of that. And it's easy to be like, well, I'm going to go make enough that I'll come back and I'll fix it. And then you miss it. Or it's easy to think that I'm just going to wake up one day and it's not going to be a problem, or someone else will deal with it. Or if I made $1 billion, I would be able to hire the help. Like maybe I can hire help, and maybe I can't. Maybe I can't delegate navigating my parents getting older. I think that groundedness is something that was very apparent during this trip and not easy to deal with. It felt like grief. It felt like, man, the reality of this is smashing into what my responsibilities are going to look like, or how am I going to be ready for, if something happens and I'm 2,500 miles away. But that groundedness is also what makes every bit of our work here so much more valuable. I think there's a big difference between what we want and what we need. And sometimes vision and the pursuit of more directly conflicts with the reality of our family, of our friends, of the normal people. And it's important that you have some reminders of that. This week was a great set of perspectives for me, even with different friction. Having them for a week tested my boundaries. It tested my limits. There were things where like I felt, here's what happened. I felt disrespected, but they're my parents. They obviously wouldn't intend to disrespect me. So I just had to come to that conversation differently. And I think this is a business skill for us, you, me, to master, to be able to understand and accept that someone is doing the best they can, to meet them where they are, to stop making assumptions about what they knew or intended, and to simply come to the conversation with like, hey, this is how I feel when that happened. Or, hey, I'd like to do this. Can we work together on that? Or, hey, why did you guys pick this? Can you help me understand why you made this choice over something else? And because they were here for a week, I saw a lot of that play out. I spent all of this morning journaling tons of different observations about myself and about how I can better accept them. There's a book by Mel Robbins called Let Them. Certainly is applicable to some of this, though there are more drastic examples in that book that I would highly recommend. There's also a famous statement from Sarah Blakely, who owns Spanx, awesome entrepreneur. Her husband, Jesse Itzler, another awesome entrepreneur. And I think they're on stage, and Sarah is talking about someone in her life, some person in her life who said, don't try to understand him being Jesse. Don't try to understand him. Just love him. And I want to get better at that. I want to get better at showing up like that for my parents, for my son, rather than trying, like, obviously I have to mold him and guide him and protect him and do all those things, but to let him be him, to let my dad be him, to let my mom be her, and to show up with the lens of acceptance while also being reminded of where I came from, to not be stuck in my echo chamber, to see things differently, to remember that there was a time where a $5 coffee was out of reach, to remember that a nice dinner, $100 meal was beyond us for a month at a time, to remember that those things are a luxury and that I strove to create this kind of lifestyle, but that I didn't come from that, is a really big part of what I think makes good leadership in business. It's bigger than family. I know that you might have your family dynamics, your challenges, your friction, and I would encourage you to really lean into it. And if you can handle a couple days or a weekend where you're all in the same space and go into it with a degree of grace and openness about what you might learn about yourself, you might just find some really good gold for your vision, your business, your relationships, and your next evolution. I hope you continue to hold that vision high and stay connected to where you came from. I know this week was a reminder of that for me. Have a good day today. Thanks for listening. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. I'd love to hear your feedback, your take on this episode. Maybe share a little bit about your family dynamics and what scares you about hosting your family for a week. Would you pull your hair out? Would you go insane? What would you do? How would you feel? And if you're on Apple or Spotify, leave me a review, 5 stars if you love this episode. I would appreciate that a lot. It just takes 2 minutes. And I hope to see you on the next episode. We'll see you guys soon.